How's it going, everyone? It's Savi from Weather Storm 5000. Today is August 28th, 2019, as we will be analyzing Hurricane Dorian, which, as of the 8 o'clock advisory, is an 80 mile per hour maximum sustained wind hurricane with moving slightly slower from the last update at 13 miles per hour. So it hasn't increased at all from the last update back at 5 o'clock. And looking at the current satellite imagery, I can kind of see why, because we've been seeing, although like over the past several loops, I've been seeing that the rotation around the center of circulation has been definitely increasing, more visible, because before it just looked like a tropical storm. Now it's starting to look like an actual hurricane with those rain bands starting to spin around, and we're seeing those clusters of thunderstorms starting to develop within the center of circulation and also just outside of it. But as you can see towards the western portion of the storm, we see an abundance of dry air. So to be honest, for this update, I wouldn't have been surprised if we saw a weakening with Hurricane Dorian, because we've been seeing this upper level low just north of the Dominican Republic area, pulling a lot of that dry air and also bringing a little bit of upper level winds. But at the same time, hurricanes, usually when they're near an upper level low, the upper level low actually enhances hurricane development because it gives an outflow channel for a lot of that air that has risen up above the clouds of the hurricane. It gives it basically an area where that all that air um, that the hurricane rose up into the atmosphere, it allows that to sink within that upper level low, allowing for more air to continue to rise in this area of the hurricanes, which is definitely not good news. We don't want to see this hurricane remain healthy like this, but unfortunately, with this upper level low enhancing that outflow channel that the hurricane could release a lot of its air, we're seeing that the hurricane could strengthen from here on out until possibly its landfall potentially in the United States. But we do see that dry air just south of the Dominican Republic. We'll have to see if up ahead that dry air entrains this storm system, to see if it could weaken in over the next 24 hours. But I think after it passes through this area, if it doesn't weaken, then I find it difficult to see this storm really weaken after that, because as you can see, it's under mostly favorable conditions. We see those light greens represent favorable conditions for Hurricane Dorian, and then we see where the reds are. That's where the upper level low is centered. It's very unfavorable due to the amount of dry air and also the wind shear that's surrounding this upper level low, and it's also partially due to tropical depression Aaron, which is just off the coast of South Carolina. But we expect this upper low area to move further south, more towards Cuba and closer to the Yucatan Peninsula, and I'll show you why, to put it back in perspective. So the hurricane is approximately here, probably a little bit more northwest than that, probably just north of Puerto Rico at this point, but it's right around here. And I'm gonna move this forward a little bit. You could see that. I want you to focus on this area. This is most likely where the upper level low will be, and it's due to this oncoming ridge that's gonna center over the southeast portion of America, and that ridge is gonna steer that upper level low, which is just north of Dominican Republic right now, further down to the southeast, and that'll allow Hurricane Dorian to have pretty much an open area to have favorable conditions. So although we're seeing mainly unfavorable conditions just north of the Dominican Republic area, expect that to change, because that upper level low is expected to move further south with this high pressure just to the southeast, going to steer, which is going to be the same high pressure that will steer Dorian closer to the United States. And there's still a lot of uncertainty where it'll exactly impact in the United States. It could impact the Florida area, it could impact more the Carolinas, and it could even impact somewhere as far west as Alabama and Mississippi. I'll show you the current forecast as of 5 o'clock. So I know I just mentioned that we just had the 8 o'clock update, but the Hurricane Center only updates the forecast track every 6 hours. So there's basically the same track we would expect for the 8 o'clock advisory. So as you can see, we have a potentially major hurricane that could make landfall between the Miami area all the way up north to the Savannah area. But keep in mind that the forecast cone, it doesn't mean that the Hurricane Dorian is 100% going to stay in this forecast cone, because only 2/3% of the time the tropical cyclone stays within the forecast cone. So there's still, and especially when we're talking 5 days out, there's still a lot of uncertainty where exactly this could go, and we don't even know if it could stay within this cone, because there's still a lot of factors to keep in mind before we see the storm before we have a definitive answer to where exactly the storm could go, and I'll tell you why. So this storm is expected to strengthen due to the most part, the lack of wind shear that's going to be expected ahead. Even though we have that upper level low, like I said, we're going to see that upper level low move more towards the Yucatan Peninsula. So we should see an open lane for Dorian to continue to strengthen. And the water temperatures won't be a problem, because not only we're above average for the year, you see the upper ocean heat content, we have just an abundance of warm water that the hurricane could absorb. So warm water won't be the problem. Dry air, I expect for the most part, won't be a problem, especially with how small Dorian is, because with small hurricanes, they don't absorb much air around them. So unless the dry air is extremely close in proximity to the center of circulation, it's unlikely that Hurricane Dorian will absorb much dry air, even if it's just south of the Dominican Republic, as this storm is just so small, it won't absorb a lot of dry air. So for the most part, we won't see dry air, which is why the National Hurricane Center expects this to continue to strengthen steadily. But then after that, I expect mainly an open lane for Hurricane Dorian to strengthen. There's still uncertainty because, like I said before, wind shear could definitely alter. There's still a lot of factors, and I'll show you why. So for the most part, computer models are expecting that Dorian will strengthen to 985 millibars, which I would assume at this point, converting it, since Hurricane Dorian's a little smaller, it's probably going to be stronger than what you think would be accustomed to 985 millibar hurricane, because usually small storms don't have low millibar pressures. So I would expect this a high in Cat 2 or Cat 3 by the time we enter Saturday, August 31st. And moving forward, we see that it continues to strengthen, as the upper level low is basically centered over the Yucatan Peninsula, not going to affect it. There's no other trough that could really disrupt it from really strengthening, and I expect mainly a strengthening storm from here. And as for the steering patterns, some of the computer models were hoping that this weakness in ridging between basically throughout the eastern Atlantic due to Dorian and this trough that's just to the south in southern Canada, some people were hoping that it could kind of find its way out to sea by following Aaron, but that seems unlikely at this point, because we see this ridge of high pressure pretty much build before it could sneak its way out to sea. We see this high pressure build over the southeast, and that'll be the main steering current for Dorian to just bring it to the southeast pretty much. But then the question still remains whether or not Dorian will take the more northern track up to the Carolinas and Georgia, or the more southern track, which may put the Gulf Coast states at risk, I'm including Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and all the way into Texas, because the GFS is taking more of the northern track where we're seeing more of an effect to Georgia and Florida. And even though the GFS isn't exactly showing and much impacts to the Carolinas as of right now, they're like I said, 5 days out, there's still a lot of uncertainty. I wouldn't be surprised if these computer models like the GFS and the European alter their current forecast from day to day because usually 5 days out we see patterns where computer models usually shift in one direction and then shift another direction and move in and then don't leave your guard down just yet for the Carolinas because there's still a possibility that it could trek up north. But the big question remains is that will there be a ridge of high pressure? Will there be enough ridging along the central United States to force Dorian more towards the western track, which could put the Gulf states and much of Florida more at risk, or like the GFS is stating, but at a lesser extent, will we see just enough of troughs or not enough ridging to where this trough could push the ridge a little bit faster, which could allow Dorian to sneak more up north to the mid-Atlantic states. We have to wait to find out. There's still a lot of uncertainty. The GFS is favoring more of a northern track, while the European model is favoring more of a southward track and a landfall potentially in between the Florida Panhandle and the Mobile, Alabama area, right around where Hurricane Ivan made landfall about 15 years ago. But it really just depends on whether there will be enough ridging here, as the European is going against what the GFS is saying. European is favoring more of a ridge that's going to steer Dorian more towards the west, while the GFS is favoring more of a northern track where there won't be enough ridging to really push the storm more out west. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. It's too early to really say with confidence who's going to get definitive impacts from this because, like I said before, even though the track still aims towards Florida, I wouldn't be panicking just yet, but I would make sure to at least prepare now before like it's too late, before all the supplies run out. I would say prepare now just in case. It's better to be safe than sorry in Florida, because in Florida it's very likely somehow, some way you're going to experience impacts with this, and I could say that with confidence. Florida will definitely experience some impacts from this, and potentially direct impacts is definitely becoming more and more likely, as there isn't really much other scenarios where this could go. We don't think it could sink its way out to sea. We don't think it'll just weaken. We think that somewhere in Florida should experience the impacts. We're not sure exactly where that landfall will be, because look at that forecast cone between Miami and Jacksonville. There's still a huge gap of uncertainty between these two cities, and that's definitely important to keep in mind as we're going to look at the models. Most of the models are favoring the central Florida track, but some are pointing more up north to even North Carolina, South Carolina near the Savannah area, and a lot of them are also affecting the Florida Panhandle as well. So there's still some uncertainty with the exact track and forecast with this, but as for the strength of this, I expect this to continue to strengthen due to all the reasons I stated. That upper level low is going to enhance an outflow channel for this hurricane to really strengthen, and we're going to see those warmer than average water temperatures fuel this storm. And I don't think the dry air will be enough to really weaken it up ahead, because Hurricane Dorian is such a small storm that it won't absorb much dry air around it. But I guess that's it for this video. My main point is that Southeast should be watching. There's still a lot of uncertainty. I know I keep saying that, but I'm going to make sure that everyone from Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, even as far west as Louisiana or Texas should be at least monitoring this, and it won't be and you guys certainly aren't out of the woods just yet when it comes to the forecast. But Florida, definitely start preparing now. I won't say any definitive impacts. It's better to be safe than sorry, like I said. And a Category 3 is possible in the Central Florida area, which hasn't been seen since in the Central Florida area in years. Even Hurricane Matthew was the closest one 3 years back, but it stayed just offshore to where a lot of the worst of the storm was just offshore of you guys. So you definitely dodged a bullet there. But this time we could potentially see a landfalling major hurricane make landfall in Central Florida. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching this update, as I will update you eventually soon, and I'll make a shorter video than this to summarize everything I said. And enjoy your day.